Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to join Minister Lecce and MPP Pierre at the Climbers Rock to kick off both Mental Health Week and Education Week with today's announcement on how our government is supporting the mental health of our students. I'd like to give a special welcome to Kathy Hay, the CEO of Kids Help Phone, to Rashad Vahid, CEO of CMHA, Halton Region, and John Reynolds, Chair of Joseph Brant Outpatient Care. We know that ensuring children and youth have access to timely and appropriate mental health and addiction supports is essential to helping them on the road to better health. This includes enhancing mental health supports in our schools to prevent mental health issues and identify and intervene early when they happen. And it means measuring that there are strong linkages to community-based mental health care services so that students get the right care at the right time and in the right place. It also means investing in strengthening community-based services, including innovative initiatives such as youth wellness hubs, low-barrier supports like the One-Stop Talk virtual walk-in counseling services, and programs for eating disorders. We're better connecting young people to the services that are convenient for them, including strengthening the continuity of mental health care and youth in school in the broader community. This is part of our government's work to implement the Roadmap to Wellness, our comprehensive plan to build a world-class mental health and addiction system that better connects people to the safe, evidence-based care they need. This work is supported by an investment of $3.8 billion over 10 years. This investment will provide a 5% increase base funding to community-based mental health and addiction service providers, the largest increase in a decade. And that's with respect to the recent announcement in our budget of the $425 million over the next three years. With the work that we're doing, we're making sure that we have strong linkages to community-based mental health care services, that the students get the right care at the right time at the right place. And the investment of the 5% increase in base funding community-based mental health is the largest increase that we've seen in a decade. In closing, I'd like to express my sincere appreciation to everyone in our education system for everything you do to help young people maintain good mental health and provide them with the assistance and resiliency skills they need to face their challenges. Our government will continue with our partners to ensure students have access to the mental health resources and the supports they need when and where they are needed. Thank you on behalf of myself and our entire team, and I'll now invite Minister Lecce up to say a few words.
Thank you all. Good morning, and thank you, Minister Tibollo, for the introduction. I also want to thank our partners with us today, thank our hosts at Climbers Rock here in Burlington, note and welcome the Mayor, as well as many partners who are with us today for this positive announcement. I also want to thank former MPP Jane McKenna, who is with us today. You know, a few years ago, MPP McKenna reached out to me one night asking me to call a mom in her community, a lady who had overcome an incredible level of adversity in her life. And so that night, on Jane's request, I made a call to a mom named Natalie Pierre, private citizen, advocate, and someone who has faced a great deal of darkness in her personal life. And Natalie's message to me was a message of hope, that if we work together to strengthen the literacy, the mental health literacy of our children, and we increase the funds and the supports, we can literally help save lives. And today, here we are in Burlington, no less, with now MPP Natalie Pierre, an amazing advocate, and someone who's leaving a positive legacy in her son's life. And we are so humbled and proud to be with Natalie, her husband, their friends, and the people who loved Mike, to leave a legacy in his name. And so we're here, because these are happy tears, because I think we see the light in that darkness, and that we're able to stand strong, united today to save lives, to make sure that no parent has to face that, the tragedy that was their story. And we have an ability as members of governments to leave legacy through good public policy by strengthening the literacy, the curriculum, the supports in place. And that's exactly why Michael, why Natalie, and why I are here today. Because we recognize that mental health is foundational to the success of a child. Yes, in academics, but well beyond that. And it's why we have systematically stepped up our supports. You know, since we started in 2018, funding has been increased by 555%. That is a significant benchmark, a significant increase, no matter how you see it. We're talking about $114 million more of investment in our publicly funded schools. That's amazing. But I also recognize to the moms and dads watching today who see their kids suffering, that is not enough. We have to do more, and it's why we together, Minister Tibollo, MPP Pierre, and I, are sending a message that we will continue to be there in support of our children and our communities who face incredible levels, increasing levels of mental health affliction. Now, we are spending more than any province in the country. We recognize the need to strengthen literacy. It's why just in a week, last week, when we brought forth over the past weeks the Better Schools and Student Outcomes Act, we brought forth an act specifically for the first time that mentions mental health in the Education Act. We brought forth this legislation in parts to give the Minister of the Day the authority to set priorities, including mental health across the board, to ensure student achievement. Because we all know mental health and well-being are the foundations of student success. So we're going to ensure new educators now have more detailed and focused training on student mental health and special education, something that I know Minister Tibollo and others have strongly encouraged us to do, to make sure that our educators in the front of class are better positioned to help our kids. And so we will help strengthen the literacy for those educators as well. We know students today more than ever are facing real challenges when it comes to mental health. Eating disorders and depression is at a level we've not seen in our society. Self-doubt, anxiety, and bullying, especially online, is facing so many kids. You know, nearly half of students in grades 7 to 12 said that they wanted to reach out to someone about a mental health problem during their first year of the pandemic, but they simply didn't know who to turn to. We know we must and we can ensure that this is no longer the case. Our young people need to know that they are not alone and that they can get the help that they need. And so today, on behalf of my amazing colleague Natalie Pierre, who brought forth a motion months ago, calling on Parliament to step up and to leave a legacy that saves lives because of Natalie's leadership, and I mean this, if not for the work Natalie did, pressurizing government, working with the ministries of health and education, we wouldn't be here today. And so I want to thank you for your strength and your courage and your determination, Natalie, to make sure that every child is better off. And so today, because of Natalie, we're very excited to announce that Ontario students will have more supports. We're going to increase funding, $12 million for this year, $14 million for next year, $16 million the year after, to ensure summer mental health supports continue, that we no longer have kids having to go back in community, not having access to the same mental health practitioner in July and August. We want to create consistency for the child and some sense of comfort for the parent, that they can have an annual year-long access to practitioners in their schools. That's part of today's announcement. We're also recognizing that schools are sometimes the first places that students will reach out for help. And so we're going to ensure year-round access to mental health programming and resources, especially when it comes to better connections with the community, so that we are utilizing the full mental health ecosystem around our kids. You know, in recent years, over 115,000 students access mental health supports in schools. In fact, over 23,000 access them during the summer alone. It makes it clear that we need to ensure that these kids have access to stable mental health supports where they need it in every community. So we're going to do that. ensure all school boards have the funding to annualize mental health supports right through the summer, a key recommendation of families, and of course, part of the spirit of Natalie Pierre's leadership today. But we know that's not enough. We know that students also need to learn, to grow and thrive in education environments. They need to be more literate when it comes to their mental health. And while Ontario is a leader in developing the most comprehensive mental health education in the country, we recognize today part of Natalie Pierre's motion and her call to arms for all of us to step up is that we're going to go further. And so I'm proud to announce that the government will introduce new learning resources, mandatory learning in grades 7 and 8, with consistent, up-to-date, comprehensive learning on mental health literacy that will be ready this September. This additional learning will be aligned with the health and physical education curriculum. And to make sure we get this right, we're going to be relying on experts, leveraging the experience of School Mental Health Ontario with the advice from Sick Kids to develop these learning modules which will be consistent across Ontario. Because it's about helping students learn the relationships between mental health and mental illness, to help manage stress, for young people to manage multiple projects, to identify actions to counter stigma, and really, most fundamentally, where they can turn for support. We'll also be strengthening learning on mental health for high school students as well, because in Natalie Pierre's motion, it calls on an elementary and a high school fix, a gap that she perceived that existed within the education curriculum. And so today, on behalf of Minister Tibollo and Natalie Pierre, we're proud to also be announcing we will be adding new mandatory learning expectations in the grade 10 career studies curriculum with respect to mental health literacy and promotion, so that students in high school at a slightly older age will be better positioned to recognize the signs of being overwhelmed or struggling with anxiety, knowing where to turn to locally for assistance both in community and in their schools. The mission is to create a personal toolbox of skills that a young person could utilize in their life, in their jobs, and in the classroom. And I think this is fundamental to creating more usable, practical learning that can help young people be resilient and to overcome the daily obstacles that is life. Because our goal is to ensure students have the tools they need, with a focus on understanding how a healthy mind and body is critical to long-term academic and lifelong success. And while we're continuing to emphasize mastering the fundamentals of reading, writing, and math, we know mental health is the first step towards a successful student. And so going forward, we're going to continue to work with the mental health partners who are present and those across the country, as well as our leaders in the Ministry of Health, to ensure that our communities have the supports they need, a more holistic, aligned sector where we're able to provide services in communities as well as support kids in our schools. It's about connecting students to the knowledge and the mental health they need. And it means helping them discover a healthy, balanced lifestyle. And it also means participating in activities, overcoming a sense of angst. There's a reason why we're at a rock climbing facility today. You know, it speaks about the sense of perseverance that can come, the idea that in difficulty we can triumph with a sense of hope and optimism. And that is why we're here today. It's why we're in Burlington. It's why we are standing with Natalie Pierre, because she is the physical manifestation of hope and optimism, of strength and courage. And we're very grateful, we're humbled to work with her, to have delivered on this. It would not have been done if not for her exceptional leadership. And it's why I'm very honored to introduce her to you all today. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Minister Lecce and Minister Tibollo, and thank you for our esteemed guests who have taken time out of their busy days to join us here today. Before I get started with my remarks, I'd like to recognize Laura Grennan. Laura is a Burlington constituent and an avid supporter of student mental health. I told myself I wasn't going to cry, but who has been by my side since the very beginning of this initiative. And so really it is a community event with government, Minister Lecce, Minister Tibollo, and others in the community here today who've come out to support this initiative. So as many of you here today may already know my family story. For those who don't, almost 6 years ago, my 17-year-old son took his own life. Mike seemed just like any other student. The day before he died, he took a university campus tour. He worked a few hours at his part-time job, and he got together with friends. The night before, he went to a school dance. Sorry, thank you. Anyone seeing him would have observed a normal, healthy teenager. But we know now that was not the case. In the months and years that followed, I was shocked at just how many people, colleagues, family members, friends, neighbors, lawyers, teachers contacted me and came forward to share their own personal experience with mental health struggles and how they suffered in silence. I decided we needed to do something about that. We know teaching literacy is what our schools do best, and so I began to advocate to teach mental health education in the classroom, just like we teach math and phys ed. I knocked on doors, I made calls, sent emails, sent letters, and then late one evening in 2019, the phone rang. And it was Minister Lecce. So just a mom, just a private citizen, and I received a call from Minister Lecce inviting me to participate in an announcement at the Centre for Mental Health and Addiction in Toronto to announce the doubling of funding from this government for student mental health supports in schools. It was clear this government was listening. It was clear this government cared. Fast forward a few years, and I decided to run to be the MPP for Burlington, to advocate for more change, and here we are today. I'm proud Ontario is leading the way as the first province in Canada to make mental health education required learning in schools. Our approach is proactive, practical, and evidence-based. It reaches students where they're at and at a time in their lives when mental health issues often emerge. And it's my hope that this will prevent tragedies like the one we and many other families have experienced. I'd like to thank Minister Lecce, the people at the Ministry of Education, and my staff who have worked tirelessly on this initiative. I'd also like to thank my caucus colleagues for their overwhelming support, including Premier Ford, Ministers Tibollo, Jones, Bethlen Falvey, Dunlop, and Fideli. Today's announcement is about the future. It's a good news message. It's about providing the tools for young people to manage their mental health. It's about hope. And it's about how we move forward. Thank you. I'll pass it back to Minister Lecce.
Questions from the floor, please step forward to the mic and state your name and outlet. Just a reminder, it's one question and one follow-up.
Hi, Minister. Laura Stone, Globe and Mail.
Hi, Laura.
I just wanted to ask about how you envision the curriculum being taught. Do you see teachers getting trained in this new curriculum? Do you see experts being brought in? How exactly do you think this will roll out?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So we have turned to School Mental Health Ontario with a support of Sick Kids to help develop the learning modules. We think it was really important to lean into professionals who every day are in the business, in the space of providing mental health supports and helping us build the literacy. With respect to training, absolutely. We're going to be dedicating a professional development day on these mental health learning modules. We want teachers to be successful. They'll be available in grades 7 and 8 this September, but they will be mandatory next September for elementary and high school to give our educators a year of time to really embrace the new learning. We want to get this right. I think Natalie made it clear, like the benchmark of success is the impact. So we're going to be working with staff through a professional development training. We'll be offering free webinars as well as a dedicated mandatory day for our teams in schools. And we'll be continuing to work with the Ministry of Health with respect to better coordination between community and schools, that those children that need more acute access to care will be turning to the Ministry of Health and some of the wonderful community partners that have stepped up through more supports by the government.
Thank you. And I wanted to ask about what happened with the York Catholic Board the other week with
Right.
some parents fighting the raising of the pride flag.
Yeah.
As minister, what do you make of this conflict that occurred, and is the government going to step in any way?
You know, look, I'm aware that we're talking about a community of children that face some of the highest mental health issues in the province. LGBTQS community have some of the highest suicide rates. You know, I think these kids most especially need to feel affirmed, need to feel safe, need to feel respected in a school community. And I obviously, you know, I'm concerned when I see kids being bullied simply because of their orientation or their difference. That isn't Canada, right? Like I think we've come a long way as a society where we embrace the LGBT community and the differences that we have within our school system. And we're at a mental health announcement in part because we recognize that there's growing levels of mental health affliction. So I think the message I want to send to those kids is that the government stands with them. We will continue to support. We will be at Pride events. We will be celebrating what the message of Pride is, which is inclusion and unconditional love to every child in Ontario. Every child. We cannot pick and choose the kids that should feel safe in 2023, no less. So I think we're sending a very clear message of solidarity with communities that have faced some of the greatest difficulties. I mean, you look at the bullying stats of LGBT kids, it is astronomically high. So I think school boards, parents, educators, government, we've got to come together. We've got to depoliticize an issue that's actually about the mental health and safety of children. And I really hope that we can unite our efforts behind safety and respect for kids and for the individual dignity that they bring with them. So I do hope that a greater focus on the safety of children, and I do hope that school boards will continue to celebrate Pride in a constructive, positive way.
So sorry, just to clarify, I mean, your message to students, what's your message to the parents? Like, do you expect that this flag to be raised in those York schools?
I believe that raising Pride flag has been a tradition that's been done all levels of government, all politicians of all stripes for many years. I think it's something that's done to send a signal of respect and inclusion, and I would welcome that in publicly funded schools. I do think it's important that we remind ourselves that some of the kids in question are the ones who have the highest rates of suicide. If there are ways we can affirm their existence, give them a sense of confidence and safety and respect in their learning environment in a publicly funded school, then we in government, we in school boards, we in society are doing our part. Every child should feel respect in Ontario schools, and that's something we insist upon.
Hey, good morning, Minister. MVP Pierre, thank you so much for sharing your story. There have been some calls to add mental health days for students as one of the excused absences in the Education Act. I'm wondering if your ministry has given that any thought.
Yeah, thank you for the question. We have been consulting with the Ministry of Health. We actually launched a joint Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education consultation about removing the silos that exist within our systems to create a better continuum of care. This is Minister Tibollo's passion about, you know, making sure that kids get care where they need it, and really leveraging community. We're consulting with the stakeholders, with student trustees on the way forward. I will say that in the Better Schools and Student Outcomes Act, for the first time, we're actually adding mental health into the Education Act. It's not even explicitly mentioned within the Education Act. We're going to be adding that to give the minister and ministry the authority to set mental health priorities systematically across all schools. But with respect to absences, it's something we're continuing to consult just to make sure we understand the intended and unintended consequences. But of course, our aim today is just to give a sense of assurance to kids that if they are facing difficulty, they will have now new supports, more investments, summer options for care, and more literacy so that they themselves know where to turn to and how to manage the stresses of life as a young child in the country.
Okay, and on education negotiations, it's been a long time since we've heard really any movement on this. I'm wondering what your time frame is for actually securing all of the contracts, because I believe none of the teachers' unions actually have any contracts, if I'm not mistaken. What is your timeline for actually finalizing them and having them all done? Is it going to be done before the end of June, as an example?
Yeah, I think we want to get these done immediately. I mean, parents deserve a sense of predictability for September. We want to keep kids in a stable, positive, safe learning environment through the rest of this year and frankly every year after years of instability in their lives. So we've called on our education union partners to accept private mediation. It has been a tool that has been used in the past with CUPE, for example, that got us to the finish line. It's a neutral party creating pressure on all of us, the unions, the government, the school boards, to get a deal done. I'd like to get these wrapped up before the school year. It does require all the parties to embrace that spirit. The government's going to stay at the table. We've met with the unions over 100 times to date, teacher unions specifically, and we're committed to getting that deal. We've just met with the education unions as recently as last week. We'll be meeting with them literally almost every week over the coming weeks. And I really hope that the education unions will accept our request for private mediation as a means to just pressurize the system so that we get a deal done and we can just move forward to focusing on academic achievement, improving literacy and math scores, and really helping to strengthen the foundational skills that have regressed over the past few years.
Good morning, everyone. Jason Goodall, CHCH News. Minister, I just wanted to ask, it's one thing for teachers to learn the modules for the mental health, with all the mental health resources, but given that mental health, like a complex issue, does that mean the province is going to be adding more mental health professionals within the system, or will we be hiring more staff to help meet those needs? So
we have increased the funding overall for staffing and services within schools by over 500% since 2018. In 2017-18, the year we were elected in Ontario, there was about an investment of roughly $18 million in Ontario publicly funded schools. Today it is over $114 million. That has enabled us to hire more staff, more psychologists, more psychotherapists, social workers, et cetera. But we also appreciate, and I will turn to Minister Tibollo in a moment and Natalie Pierre as well for perspective, but we also appreciate that a lot of parents want to turn to community-based supports, especially if their child is facing more acute needs. And Minister Tibollo has been leading and investing and building up the system that could work with children as they need care in communities across Ontario. And we're very grateful for the youth wellness hubs that he's initiated, because we can't see these things in isolation. They're all available supports in schools and communities, and we're building both up. But I will turn to Minister Tibollo, maybe just to expand on that. Thank you.
Thank you. So the most important thing we can do for children and youth is provide a continuum of care that looks after their needs. So in school, the education, the building of resiliency, the provision of the supports that are needed, because again, children spend so much time in the schools. But we also have to understand that there are moderate and acute cases that need to be dealt with outside of the school. So building that connecting piece into the community supports is extremely important. Last year, we invested an additional 5% in community-based supports. We are now increasing funding as well across the board to community-based supports with the $425 million over 3 years, because we recognize the need to continue to provide additional supports to children and youth, actually to everyone in the community, so that we can take some of the pressures off of the hospitals in terms of the provision of those supports. For me, one of the most important things we could be doing, and why this announcement is so important for me as well, is that we know that 70% of the mental health and addictions issues we see in adults could have all been treated, diagnosed in childhood. So these investments are extremely important in ensuring that we provide the supports and services at a time when the kids are most able to learn strategies to keep them healthy and safe. And of course, with mental wellness comes overall health and their ability to work in the community and enjoy all the benefits of living in our communities.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were going to say, add something, but I guess my last question is, does every school have an on-site psychologist on top of, I guess, the resources that the learning resources that they'll have?
All schools have access to mental health practitioners based on needs. Many of these staff will move to schools based on where the capacity requires it. We've increased staffing, we've increased funding by over 500%, and today we're strengthening summer learning as well as literacy and mandatory curriculum expectations when it comes to mental health to build a more resilient young citizenry where they know the tools to manage stress, anxiety, and they frankly know where to turn when they can't manage that stress or angst. And I think that's the message we're sending. Yes, one of more people, more funding, and more learning associated with mental health promotion and prevention, to Minister Tibollo's point. And when this issue first arose many years ago with Natalie, the aim was to make sure that we build upon the mandatory learning in Ontario when it comes to mental health curriculum. But there were still some gaps, particularly for high school kids, where they know specifically who they can turn to in their school communities, their school boards, and their community when it comes to mental health support. So today we're closing those gaps. We're setting higher standards, and we're frankly improving the mental health knowledge within Ontario publicly funded schools for every child starting this September.
Minister, I just wanted to clarify about the York, well, come on, we're in Burlington. No, just I hear your support for these LGBTQ students. I hear your support for the flag. Are you going to direct boards to fly the pride flag?
School boards work with parents. These are decision points local communities make. But I think what you're hearing from me is a support for actions they can take to create inclusive, safe places. And pride flag raising has been done for many years across all levels of government, all parties. There's strong support for sending signals of support and inclusion for these communities. And we're at a mental health announcement today because we recognize that they have some of the highest mental health difficulties. And so every one of us should do our part to create an inclusive space for children. And I really hope that schools will do their part and see this as a positive exercise to help elevate our knowledge and our respect for differences in schools.
This concludes our press conference. Thank you very much for joining us today.